Hi, it's Sakoswa and welcome back to my floor. So today I'm doing my first sit down video, which is pretty exciting but also nerve-wracking. Today I'm doing a video that's highly requested. And when I say highly requested, I mean Kyle Curry has bugged me to make this video for a few weeks now, so now I'm doing it. Kyle, you're welcome. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about some of the books that I've been reading recently, what I think about them, why I picked them up originally, and whether I would recommend them. I don't really have a lot of the books with me because they were library books and I had to return them, but I think I have one or two of them, so either way, let's get started. I'm going to start with the last book I read and then go backwards from there. The last book I read was Sex and Rage by Eve Babbitt, and I picked that book up mostly because I had seen it on my Instagram a lot, like this summer and also last summer, and I honestly remember picking it up last summer and trying to read it and not getting into it at all. And then when I finally got my library card this summer, it was one of their new books that they had just purchased, so I thought, let me just give it another try. This time around, I actually did get through the whole book, which was quite shocking because I wasn't really all that into it. And it's like an easy read and it's like kind of interesting, so I don't think it was like a waste of my time to read the book and finish it. If anything, I can at least say that I've read it. I guess Eve Babbitt is one of those very popular writers, kind of like Joan Didion, who is known for the way she depicts California and just like that romanticizing of the Californian landscape. So Sex and Rage is about this character, Jacaranda Levin, I believe, and essentially she's this writer, but she's grown up in California and she likes to surf and she paints surfboards, and she meets this guy who she like falls in love with, but it's one of those like friend loves, but he's very, like, what would be the word, like he's like kind of a tantalizing, mysterious enigma of a person who, you know, gives his affection when he wants to, but then can be very cold at the same time. And throughout the book, she becomes an alcoholic, she gets a book deal, it's this whole thing. And it's not one of those books that's very like, okay, this happened, this was the crisis and conflict, this is the resolution, the book ends. It's definitely one of those books that's just like moves through life events. If it was like a movie, it'd be a very like indie, like slow burn, cute music. I recommend it if you do like books that are kind of about like California, or you like books that are about writers, or I think it's very similar in the style. I think because they honestly came out too in the same era, it's very similar to the style of Valley of the Dolls, even how the characters talk and how they are with one another. So if you read Valley of the Dolls and you really enjoyed it, Sex and Rage might be for you. So the next book I'm going to be talking about is Carly Sciortino's book Slut Ever. So if you know anything about Carly, whose last name I can't pronounce, I'm so sorry, should have checked. She first started her blog Slut Ever when she was younger. I think she was living in London. She talks about it in the book, and that really blew up. I remember being like 12 or 13 and hearing about her and her blog, and being as like a 13-year-old who's just like sex, being like quite scandalized by it, but also being intrigued by the idea that sex also didn't have to be scary, and it didn't have to be weird, and you could, you know, as they say, facilitate your own nut without feeling uncomfortable. So I followed her for a long time, kind of casually. I used to read her column on Vogue.com, Breathless, which I also really enjoyed. So it just felt like a natural thing to do to pick up her book. So Slut Ever, the book, is a like, it's mostly memoir, I would say, but obviously it's meant to educate people on just kind of the world of sex, the world of modern sex that is out there. I think despite the fact that it's 2019, there really is a limited idea amongst many of us, or when we talk, that sex is only just this one thing, or these like three things, and anything outside of that is like abnormal. And so that's what's so appealing about this book. She has a quote that I wrote down, and what she says is, essentially, expanding our idea of sex would make it a lot less normy and a lot more pleasurable, especially for women. So it's that idea that if we can embrace the idea that there's a variety of sexual fantasies that we all have, and that none of those fantasies are so out of whack or are so out of this world that we can't explore them. We can all have sex as a pleasurable experience, as opposed to like a restrictive or you know, just like one lane kind of situation. The book itself is written in a very like kind of casual tone. There's like times where she like will have like ellipses, and then it'll just be like you know, it's like very very casual, which makes it really easy to read, and which I think contributes to the idea of sex not being this taboo thing that you can only really talk about in a serious way for it to be like a valid topic of conversation. It's also a pretty short book. It's like, it could be a fast read. I would definitely recommend it. Even if you don't think you're interested in reading about sex, or that doesn't really seem to be your vibe, you don't want to walk around with a book that says Slut Ever, I think it's worthy reading for anyone and everyone. There definitely were parts where I was like, and then I like quickly got over it, because at the same time, like, everyone has their thing, and if we can all respect that, things could go really great for all of us. Third book that I'm going to talk about, I actually have on my shelf. It's Homegoing by Yasi. You can't really see the name, but this is another book that I picked up because of Instagram. And essentially, the biggest appeal for me for picking it up and for actually buying it is that, one, I really like to support authors of color, especially Black female authors, and then two, because the author is from Ghana, and half of the book is set in Ghana, which is where I'm from. And so out of a narcissistic appeal, I picked it up. And honestly, when I first started reading it, I was not really sure that it was a book that I was gonna finish. I was like, ugh, like, I could really maybe regret this. And it kind of sucks that I like paid for a book that I didn't like, but at the same time, I love fiction, so I feel like I always try to give fiction a chance. And so I did my 100-page test, which is essentially, I try to read at least 100 pages, and if by page 100 I'm not into it, I'll just stop. And this book passed passed the test. I think it was even before page 100 that I was like, oh, okay, like I'm really starting to get into this. So the book is essentially about, it begins with two half sisters who don't know each other but are both born in Ghana, and essentially they start these two lines of like these two heritage lines, I guess. So one of the sisters, she ends up getting sold into slavery, and so then her bloodline carries on in the US, and then the other sister, she marries a settler, and so her bloodline stays in Ghana, but it's like very complicated because obviously it's like her bloodline is mixed in with like the white blood, and so there's the complications of being like a mixed person living on African soil, and that identity of being African, but also kind of people seeing you as an outsider because of your connection to the colonizers so directly. I think the book is really great in depicting the way politics blends into your everyday life without making it be like, this is political. I think she really depicts the effect of colonization in two very different ways, and it's like the same type of colonization in a sense, but it affects these two bloodlines very differently. And my doorbell has just been on fire today. I don't even know where I was. Yeah, just had a lovely chat with some Jehovah's Witnesses. Always a delight. Yeah, so homegoing. Essentially, each chapter is a different descendant from the two original sisters, and each of them has their own different story. There's one character who there's like an element of like a queer love story, but she never continues it, and that for that reason I kind of wish she did. Like, I'm like, I want more of this. And then that's also another thing, because each chapter is just one person, she never really goes back to a character once their chapter is done. Like, sometimes it can feel like unfulfilling in terms of like wanting to know more about what happened to certain people, but obviously because certain people are the next character's parents, you get like a little bit of their story. But I'd say that's like my biggest complaint with the book, but I would definitely recommend it. It was really actually worth the hype. So that's about it for what I've read like in the past like month or so. Definitely not as much as I wanted to read now that it's summer and like I have more time. But I was like struggling a bit to really like get into any of the books I picked up. Like I started Michelle Obama's Becoming, and I read like half of it and couldn't really get into it. I picked up a Toni Morrison that I've been wanting to read for a while, and I really couldn't get into that. But now that I've like read those 3 books, I feel like I'm very like driven again. I'm currently reading a book by George Eliot called The Mill on the Floss. It's a pretty long one, but I'm enjoying it a lot. I was shocked. This past semester I took a 19th century literature class, and it was like quite a few books that I knew, but it's been really, it kind of reignited this thing in me of wanting to read books from the past. Also, while I was filming this video, I actually got a delivery of 2 books that I will share, just because my friend Kyle has a book club and he invited me to join it, and so I like ordered the book yesterday, and Amazon is the devil, so they literally bring you things so fast. I honestly would have picked this up at like a bookstore. Like, I'm all about supporting the independent bookstores, smaller bookstores, not Amazon, but I was just feeling lazy. And that's how capitalism wins. And then I also bought a second book just to fill the shipping requirement. So the first book, this is not the book club book, but this is a book I've been wanting to read for literally eons. This is Joan Didion's Slouching Towards Bethlehem. I think this is her first essay collection. I might be wrong. I also have her White Album essay collection, and I really enjoyed that. Obviously, if you've heard of Joan Didion, you know she's very California, this kind of like, the way she observes the world, really nobody observes it like that. Nobody, I think, can. So I'm very excited to read this one club book, which I honestly had heard about this book, but I don't think I paid that much attention to it, but it came out earlier this month. It's called Patsy by Nicole Dennis Ben. It's a hardback, and I'm just such a paperback girl, but I'm glad it's this thin. I thought it would be like it's this thin. I thought it would be like double this, but a hardback, and I hate that because it's so heavy to hold. But if you don't know anything about this book, it is, I'll just quickly read the synopsis to you. It's, when Patsy gets her long-coveted visa to America, it comes after years of yearning to leave Pennyfield, the beautiful but impoverished Jamaican town where she was raised. More than anything, Patsy wishes to be reunited with her cherished friend Cicely, whose letters arrive from New York steeped in the promise of a happier life and the possible rekindling of their young love. But Patsy's plans don't include her overzealous evangelical mother, or even her 5-year-old daughter, True. So essentially this woman, she immigrates from Jamaica to New York, leaving her daughter and her family behind, and she kind of just has to deal with like the disillusionment of the American dream and living life as an undocumented immigrant. And I think there's like some queer elements to it, so I actually am pretty excited to read it. That's all for today's video. Thanks for tuning in. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I've mentioned, or if you have any recommendations for books I should read next. Also let me know if you liked this type of video, you want to see more of it, you want to know more about books I read. I keep a running list of the books I read on my blog, which I will link in the description box below, as well as links to all the books I mentioned. So if you want to buy them or check them out some more, you can. Thanks again for watching.